They buried the truth under a private school built on lies, but they made one fatal mistake. They forgot about me. For years, the only thing anyone noticed about me were my shoes. They were worn out secondhand, and the reason my classmates at the prestigious Northgate Preparatory Academy called me Charity Case. I'm Aaliyah Thompson, and for a long time I was just the quiet, adopted girl whose thrift store sneakers were the punchline of every joke in the cafeteria. They thought they knew my story, a simple, sad tale of a poor girl who didn't belong in their world of wealth and privilege. They couldn't have been more wrong. They had no idea that the secret my real parents died to protect was a ticking time bomb, and in less than 48 hours, it was going to bring their entire world, their entire school, crashing down around them. This is how I learned the truth, and how I took my revenge. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. My life as I knew it was quiet. That's the word my adoptive mom, Sarah, always used. Her voice soft like her paintbrush strokes. You're a quiet soul, Aaliyah. She meant it as a compliment, a gentle observation about how I'd rather lose myself in the pages of a book or fill sketchbooks with fantastical worlds than navigate the loud, treacherous waters of teenage social life. But at a place like Northgate, quiet didn't mean soulful. It meant weak. It meant easy target. And the bullseye was almost always painted on my feet. My shoes were a generic no-name pair of sneakers. The original white had yellowed to a sad, dingy cream color, and the soles were worn so smooth they offered zero traction on the academy's polished marble floors, often causing me to slip. The left shoe bore the mark of my dad, Tom's, handiwork, a patch of gray duct tape near the toe where the fabric had finally split open. He'd applied it with the intense focus of a surgeon, stepping back to admire his work and declaring it good as new. I loved my parents with every fiber of my being, but their version of good as new, and the version demanded by the unspoken laws of Northgate Preparatory Academy were galaxies apart. At Northgate, good as new meant the latest limited edition release, shoes that cost more than my family's monthly grocery bill. It was a kingdom of crisp, perfect uniforms and an invisible caste system. And I, Aaliyah Thompson, the only black student in my year, adopted by a loving but very middle-class white family, was firmly at the bottom. My otherness was a constant low-frequency hum in the background of my life, an identity I couldn't shed. But my shoes, they were the tangible proof, the evidence presented to the jury of my peers that I didn't belong. Section 1, the before. The daily grind. The bullying wasn't like in the movies. There was no dramatic shoving into lockers or overt physical threats. It was far more insidious, a slow and methodical erosion of my spirit, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It was the sudden hush that fell over a group when I walked down the hall, followed by a chorus of barely audible whispers. It was the symphony of snickering that would erupt from the back of the classroom whenever my worn-out soles squeaked pathetically against the floor. It was the calculated cruelty of them, accidentally dropping a pen and making a grand theatrical show of staring directly at my feet as they bent down to retrieve it, their smirks hidden from the teacher. The ringleader of this silent torture was Jessica Abernathy. Course it was Jessica. Her father was Principal Abernathy, which made her the de facto queen of Northgate. She ruled the school with the casual, bored cruelty of someone who had never been told no in her life. She was blonde, immaculately dressed, and possessed a smile that could freeze acid. Her favorite pastime, it seemed, was sharpening her claws on my existence, reminding me of my place in her kingdom. I remember one Tuesday with a painful, visceral clarity. I was in the lunch line, focusing all my energy on being invisible, on just getting my tray and disappearing. It was mystery meet surprise day, which I didn't mind. I wasn't there for the food. I was just looking forward to finding an empty corner in the courtyard to read and pretend I didn't exist for 30 minutes. Oh, look everyone, it's the Charity Case. Jessica's voice, sharp and cold as ice, sliced through the cafeteria din. Her posse of identical clones giggled on cue. Still wearing those tragic things, Aaliyah. I'm surprised they haven't disintegrated into dust by now. I kept my eyes fixed on my tray, on the quivering block of red gel. Just leave me alone, Jessica. But I'm concerned, she cooed, her voice dripping with a fake saccharine sympathy that was more insulting than any overt insult. My dad's the principal, you know. I was thinking maybe I can ask him to start a shoe drive for the less fortunate. We could call it Sols for Sad Souls. You could be the poster child, Aaliyah. Imagine your face on a poster, it would be so inspiring. The laughter was immediate and overwhelming. Felt like a physical blow. My face bloomed with heat, a deep, burning shame that started in my cheeks and spread through my entire body. My hands started to tremble, and the piece of jello, mocking my own instability, slid off my tray and plopped onto the pristine floor. Oops, Jessica said, her eyes wide with fake innocence. Then she did something that still makes my stomach clench with fury. She lifted her pristine $300 sneaker, a vibrant, spotless symbol of everything I wasn't, and deliberately, slowly squashed the jello, grinding it into the floor with a satisfied smirk. She looked from the red smear on the white tile, to my duct-tape shoes, and then back to my face. The message was unmistakable. This is what you are. Something messy, pathetic, and easily crushed under my heel. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. My throat was tight with unshed tears. I abandoned my tray, my appetite completely gone, and fled to the nearest bathroom stall. I pulled my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible, and fought back the sobs. It was the shame that hurt the most. Shame for being poor, for being different. And underneath it all, a confusing, twisting shame for feeling like I was letting my parents down, as if my inability to fit into this cruel, gilded world was a personal failure on their part. They had saved me. That's how I always saw it. They adopted me when I was 5, a scared, silent little girl who had lost her biological parents in a tragic house fire. I had no conscious memories of the fire itself, just a recurring nightmare of blinding smoke, oppressive heat, and a suffocating sense of panic. My life before Tom and Sarah was a blank, burned page. They gave me a home, a family, and more unconditional love than I could have ever imagined. They were my entire world. But this daily humiliation they couldn't understand. Just ignore them, sweetie, Sarah would say, her brow furrowed with concern. They're just insecure little girls. Sticks and stones, Aaliyah, Tom would add, quoting a tired old adage. Words can't hurt you unless you let them. They meant well, but they were wrong. Words did hurt. They burrowed under my skin like parasites and planted seeds of self-hatred that were growing into a choking vine. And those shoes. I hated them. I hated them with a fiery, desperate passion. I begged for new ones, but with Dad being a city librarian and Mom a part-time artist selling paintings at local fairs, money was always tight. The wants of a Northgate student were luxuries far beyond our reach. These have character, Aaliyah, Tom said one evening, holding my sneakers up to the light as if they were a priceless artifact. They've got stories to tell. I scoffed, the sound bitter in the quiet room. The only story they tell is that we're poor. The second the words left my mouth, I wished I could snatch them back. The hurt that flashed in his eyes was a physical blow. I mumbled a hasty apology and ran to my room, the guilt a cold, heavy stone in my gut. They had given me everything that mattered, and I was throwing it back in their faces over some stupid bullies and a pair of shoes. That night I made a promise to myself. I would never complain about the shoes again. I would wear them with my head held high, duct tape and all. I would just endure. If only I'd known he was right. Those shoes had a story, but it wasn't about character. It was about conspiracy, corruption, and a past I never knew I had. Inciting incident. The first thread. It happened a week after the Jell-O incident. I was in my room, supposed to be finishing a history paper, but mostly just sketching in my notebook, drawing fantasy worlds where outcasts were heroes and strength came from within, not from the brand stitched onto your shoes. My mom knocked softly on the doorframe. "Hey, sweetie. I was going through some old boxes in the attic and found something I think you should have." She sat on the edge of my bed, her expression gentle, and held out a small, velvet-covered box. It looked ancient. "This was in the bag of things that came with you from the foster agency," she said softly. "It was the only personal item you had with you." We've been keeping it safe for you, waiting for when you were old enough. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. The bag of things was a family legend, the only tangible link to my life before. It held a change of clothes, a worn teddy bear with one button eye that now sat on my bookshelf, and this box. They'd never shown me the box. I took it from her. It felt surprisingly heavy, weighted with unspoken history. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded yellowed satin, was a silver locket shaped like a heart. It was engraved with a delicate, winding vine of what looked like star-shaped flowers. It was beautiful, but it felt alien, like it belonged to someone else, a ghost from another life. "It's from your birth mother," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "We figured you should have it." I carefully picked it up, the silver cool and solid against my skin. "Did you ever open it?" I asked, my voice hushed. She shook her head. "No. We always felt that was for you to do, and only when you were ready." After she left, closing the door quietly behind her, I just sat there, staring at it. My biological parents were ghosts. I had no pictures, no names, just the vague, terrifying story of a fire. Opening this locket felt like a séance, like inviting those ghosts directly into my room. Finally, summoning a courage I didn't know I had, I found the tiny clasp. With a soft, metallic click, the locket opened. Inside were two tiny, perfectly preserved portraits. On the left, a woman with kind, intelligent eyes and a brilliant, radiant smile. Her hair styled in beautiful, intricate braids. My mother. On the right, a man with a serious, thoughtful expression, but with a spark of undeniable mischief dancing in his eyes. My father. A tidal wave of emotion, grief for a life I never knew, love for faces I'd never seen, and a startling, profound sense of connection, washed over me, leaving me breathless. I stared at their faces, memorizing every line, every detail. Then I saw it. Tucked behind my mother's portrait was a tiny, folded piece of paper, almost invisible. My hands shook as I carefully worked it free with the tip of a paperclip. Unfolding the fragile, brittle paper, I saw a string of tiny, precise handwriting. It was a sequence of letters and numbers. NGA, IB, CC7. BK4 PG217. It looked like meaningless gibberish. Code. Below it, a single cryptic sentence. "The truth is woven into the foundation." What foundation? What truth? My eyes darted from the cryptic note to the locket in my palm, then to the worn-out, duct-taped shoes by my door. I had no idea they were two ends of the same thread, a thread that connected my past to my present. And I was about to pull it with all my might. Section 2, Rising Action, The Unraveling. That code became my obsession. Na-lib, CC7, BK4 PG217. I wrote it over and over in the margins of my notebooks, on the back of my hand, in the steam on the bathroom mirror after a shower. It felt like a final message from my parents, a puzzle sent across time and tragedy, meant only for me. It was the first thing I thought of when I woke up and the last thing I saw before I fell into a restless sleep. PG217 had to be page 217. BK4 was surely book 4, and CC7, section 7. Lab was almost certainly library. But NGA. What was NGA? For days, I was completely stumped, my frustration mounting even as Jessica's taunts grew sharper and more frequent. "Still wearing those relics?" she'd sneer as I passed her in the hall. "Don't you get it? You will never belong here." Usually, her words would make me shrink, would send me scurrying for cover. But now I had a secret, purpose. Her voice became background noise. As she spoke, my eyes drifted past her perfectly coiffed blonde hair to the large bronze plaque in the main hall of the school. I'd passed it 1,000 times without a second glance. Northgate Preparatory Academy. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. Northgate Academy. Could it be that simple? That brazen? Maybe. The Northgate Academy Library. My own school. The foundation. That afternoon I couldn't get out of school fast enough. I raced to the town library where my dad worked, my mind buzzing. I told him I had a massive history project on the town's founding families, and he was thrilled, happily setting me up in a quiet corner of the archives. The second he was gone, I started my real search. What if the code didn't mean a book in the school library, but a book about the school? In the town's historical archives, under a thick layer of dust, I found a multi-volume self-published series on the town's major institutions. Volume 4. A History of Education and Governance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. I flipped to Section 7, The Founding and Construction of Northgate Preparatory Academy. My breath hitched. With a trembling finger, I turned to page 217. It was a full-page black-and-white photograph of a group of stern-looking people in suits and hard hats at a construction site. The caption read, "The Founding Board and Primary Benefactors of Northgate Preparatory Academy, Groundbreaking Ceremony, 1984. I scanned the faces, my heart pounding, not even sure what I was looking for. And then I saw them. Standing slightly off to the side, away from the main group, a man and a woman. It was my parents, the faces from the locket. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. My biological parents weren't just vaguely connected to the school. They were there. At the founding. The truth is woven into the foundation. The words echoed in my head, no longer a riddle, but a chilling statement of fact. I frantically read the names listed below the photo. Chairman Franklin Abernathy, Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, and at the very end, under the heading Lead Project Engineers, James and Alani Carter. My parents had names. James and Alani. My name is Aaliyah, their daughter. If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. I devoured the rest of the section, my blood turning to ice. The book, written in dry, academic language, detailed how the school was built on land mired in controversy. There had been lawsuits from displaced residents, questions about rushed environmental reports, and accusations of bribes paid to city officials. The main benefactor, the man at the center of the photo, was Franklin Abernathy, Jessica's grandfather. The book mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the lead engineers, the Carters, had raised serious concerns about structural and financial irregularities. They had filed a formal complaint that was quickly and mysteriously dismissed. A few months after that, a single, chillingly brief sentence noted that the Carters died in an accidental house fire. Accidental. The word was a lie. My entire body went cold. They raised concerns. They filed a complaint against the powerful Abernathy family. And then they were gone, erased in a fire that was ruled an accident. This wasn't an accident. This was an execution. That night the nightmare returned, but this time it was terrifyingly vivid. It wasn't just smoke and heat anymore. I could smell the acrid scent of burning wood, feel the blistering heat on my skin. I heard my mother's voice, not screaming, but urgently singing a lullaby, trying to keep me calm. Then I heard a man's voice, my father's voice, urgent and scared. The drive. Get the drive to him. He'll know what to do. And then a strange sensation, not of falling, but of being carefully passed through a small, tight opening. The last thing I felt before waking up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, was something small and hard being tucked firmly into the sole of my tiny shoe. I sat bolt upright in my bed, my heart racing. The shoe. Not the thrift store sneakers I wore now, but the original shoes. The shoes I was wearing the night of the fire. My mom had kept them. My mind was on fire. I flew to my closet and pulled down a dusty box labeled Aaliyah's Keepsakes. Inside, beneath my first baby blanket and the one-eyed teddy bear, was a pair of tiny, singed sneakers. With shaking hands, I took one and grabbed a scalpel from an old art kit. The rubber sole was thick and firm. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I sliced into it. And there it was. A tiny, flat microchip, encased in a small square of heat-resistant plastic. Tucked beside it was another tiny, folded piece of paper. More of my mother's beautiful, precise handwriting. If you are reading this, my darling Aaliyah, it means we failed. Copy is with A. He will know what to do. Trust him. The foundation is rotten, my love. Burn it to the ground. Abernathy. No, that was impossible. My mind flashed back to the photo, to the article. Then I remembered something my dad had mentioned once when complaining about a new school policy. Principal Abernathy's first name. His name was Arthur. Jessica's dad. Arthur Abernathy. Why on earth would my parents trust the son of the man they were trying to expose? Unless Arthur wasn't like his father. Had the chip. Had the message. I had the horrible, earth-shattering truth. The 48-hour countdown had begun. The next morning, the microchip felt like a burning coal in my pocket. My plan was simple, reckless, and born of grief and fury. Confront Principal Abernathy. I waited until third period, when the hallways were quiet, then walked on autopilot to his office, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I need to see Principal Abernathy, I stammered to his stern-faced secretary. It's an emergency. Principal Abernathy is in a board meeting, she said flatly, not even looking up. He can't be disturbed. Course he was. Desperation, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. Just as I was about to turn away, defeated, the office door opened, and Jessica walked out looking bored. She saw me standing there and her face twisted into a familiar sneer. What are you doing here? Trying to get a scholarship for new shoes. I need to see your father, I said, my voice shaking but laced with a new, hard strength. He's busy, she snapped, flipping her hair over her shoulder. And he doesn't have time to deal with people like you. Something inside me, a dam that had been holding back years of humiliation, grief, and simmering rage, finally broke. People like me. I shot back, my voice ringing out in the quiet office, sharp and clear. You mean people whose parents your family murdered? The color drained from her perfectly tanned face. For the first time, I saw genuine shock in her eyes. What did you just say? You heard me, I said, taking a step toward her, feeling a strange sense of power. Your grandfather built this school on lies, and when my parents found out, he killed them to protect it. You're insane, she whispered, but her eyes were wide with a dawning fear. My parents were James and Alani Carter, I said, the names feeling like armor. They were the engineers on this project. They found out what your grandfather was doing. I pulled the microchip from my pocket and held it up between my thumb and forefinger. And I have the proof right here. At that exact moment, the conference room door swung open and Principal Arthur Abernathy stepped out, a folder in his hand. He saw the standoff between me and his daughter. His face etched with confusion. Then his eyes locked onto the chip in my hand. He went deathly pale. He knew. In that instant I knew that he knew what it was. Aaliyah, he said, his voice low and strained. Let's go into my office. Now. He closed the door behind us, the sound echoing the finality of the moment. He looked older than I had ever seen him, suddenly frail and defeated. My father. James, he sent me to you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The note said to trust A. To trust you. He sank heavily into his large leather chair. James was my best friend, he breathed, the words thick with decades of guilt. We were going to expose my father together. James had gathered all the evidence, the laundered money, the falsified structural and safety reports, the bribes. He put it all on 2 encrypted drives. He kept one and he gave me the other for safekeeping. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a pain so profound it stole my breath. The night of the fire, I got a call from Alani. She was screaming that they were in the house, that my father's men had come for them. She told me to run, to protect the evidence and to find you. Then the line went dead. My father found out I was helping James. He made me watch as he destroyed my copy of the drive. He told me if I ever said a word, he would find you and ensure you met the same fate. He knew you got out. I was a coward. I was terrified. So I did nothing. So you just let him get away with it. I asked, betrayal sharp and bitter in my voice. I did the only thing I could, he said, his voice cracking. I played the part of the loyal son. I took over this school and I've been waiting. I tried to find you, but the adoption records were sealed. James was a genius. He built a digital backdoor into the school's entire infrastructure. Kill switch. The code to activate it was on that drive. On your drive. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The drive wasn't just evidence. It was the weapon my parents had left behind. He pointed a trembling finger to his computer. Let's honor them. Let's burn it to the ground. Took less than 5 minutes. I inserted the chip into a reader on his desk. A black command line window popped up on the monitor. He typed a long, complex password. It needs 2-part authorization, he said, his voice grim. His and mine. The final key is yours. Do it. With my heart in my throat, I reached out and pressed the enter key. Instantly, the lights in the office flickered and died. The computer screen became a dizzying cascade of scrolling text. Files deleting, servers wiping, financial records corrupting into gibberish. A shrill alarm began to blare throughout the school. A panicked voice came crackling over the intercom. Attention! All systems are down. We have a catastrophic network failure. Principal Abernathy stood up and opened his office door. The hallway was already filling with confused students and teachers. He walked calmly to the main office microphone, took a deep breath, and his voice, amplified and clear, boomed through every room and corridor. Attention students and staff. Effective immediately, Northgate Preparatory Academy is closed indefinitely. Due to irreparable financial and structural malfeasance discovered, the school is ceasing all operations. All Abernathy Corporation assets are frozen. The school is, for all intents and purposes, gone. A stunned, disbelieving silence fell over the entire building, which was quickly followed by a rising roar of confusion and panic. He looked at me through the office window, and for a second, he wasn't the principal. He was my father's best friend. He gave me a small, sad, triumphant nod. We had done it. The next 2 days were a chaotic blur of news vans camped outside the school gates and investigators swarming the grounds. The Abernathy scandal exploded across every news channel. Franklin Abernathy and his entire former board were arrested. The scale of the corruption was staggering. Decades of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The structural reports my father had written all those years ago were proven to be horrifyingly accurate. The school was a death trap, built on a rotten foundation. The entire campus was condemned within 48 hours of the shutdown. My name was kept out of it completely, at Arthur Abernathy's insistence. He took full credit and full blame for the takedown, finally keeping the promise he had made to my parents. I sat my own parents, Tom and Sarah, down in our small living room and told them everything. The locket, the code, the fire, the microchip, the truth. Tom held my hand tightly the entire time, his knuckles white. Sarah cried, not with sadness, but with a fierce, overwhelming pride that made my own eyes burn. Your parents were heroes, Aaliyah, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. They are, Sarah corrected softly, squeezing my other hand. And so are you. In that moment, sitting between them, I wasn't the adopted daughter anymore. I was simply their daughter. And I was James and Alani's daughter too. I held both truths, both loves inside me. All of it was me, whole and complete. The school's sudden closure sent shockwaves through the student body. Their carefully constructed world of petty hierarchies and inherited privilege simply evaporated overnight. I saw Jessica a few days later outside a grocery store. She looked hollowed out, lost. Her perfect hair was a mess, and her expensive clothes looked rumpled. Is it true, she asked, her voice small and broken, about my grandfather? Everything they're saying. I just nodded, there was nothing else to say. I'm sorry, she mumbled, looking down at the pavement, unable to meet my eyes. About your shoes. About everything. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. But as I looked at her, I didn't feel the familiar sting of hatred or the satisfaction of revenge. I just felt a strange, hollow pity for a girl whose entire world had been a lie. "Goodbye, Jessica," I said and walked away, not looking back. The state used the seized Abernathy assets to set up a scholarship fund for all the displaced Northgate students. I enrolled in the large, noisy public high school I should have gone to all along. It was bigger, louder, and wonderfully, beautifully diverse. For the first time I walked through school halls and no one cared about my shoes. They cared about what I had to say in class, my drawings for the school paper, my ideas. On my first day I wore new sneakers. They weren't expensive or flashy. Just a simple pair of black canvas shoes I had picked out and paid for myself. As I walked through the crowded halls, I didn't feel like a charity case or an outcast. Felt like Leah, a girl loved by two incredible families. A girl who learned that the most powerful truths can be hidden in the most humble and unexpected places. My old baby shoes, the tiny singed sneakers that started it all, now sit in a display box on my shelf, right next to my mother's silver locket. They're no longer a symbol of shame or a painful memory. They're a monument. They are a constant reminder that you can never judge a story by its cover, because you never ever know what secrets, what power, what fire someone is carrying in their souls. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.